Ladies and gentlemen, we've missed you over the last couple of weeks, and we would like to welcome you back to the draft board over our little hiatus in April. Hope everyone's been doing well out there. Hope no one got pranked too hard at the top of the month. Just kidding. We're still in COVID. That's a real prank here.
Oh.
But it's not funny.
No, it's not.
Nonetheless, we are back with another episode here at the draft board, and we are excited to have you guys tuning in, and girls, of course, whether you're tuning in the morning, afternoon, evening, or unreasonably late at night. We appreciate
that's
you.
My
either
favorite.
way.
I'm the type of person that listens to podcasts between 2 and 5 a.m.
I sleep during those hours, just for the record. Anyways, we are also excited today because we have our second guest star of our podcast's young existence. And that, of course, is the gentleman sitting on my right-hand side. Cam Coates, for those of you who don't know him, is a very old friend of mine, a very good friend of mine. Cam, how you doing?
Doing very well. I'm actually really happy to be here, guys. I really appreciate you inviting me.
It's good.
It's an awesome experience. I've been listening to the podcast, really get into it. It's got a nice back and forth, which I think really makes for kind of a personal podcast. I don't quite listen to them from 2 to 5 like you do,
That's
but
fine.
I listen to it when I'm on my way to work, working, anything like that, and it's it's great. I'm really happy to be here.
Mm-hmm.
We are happy to have you, Cam, and without further ado, let's just get right into this. Oh, actually, no, before we get right into this, I also have to shout out one of your friends, Cam, Josie Hollis, someone that you recommended our show to, and you just told us before we went live here that she's been enjoying so far. So, I mean, hey, Josie, we have not spoken to each other in a very long time, but hope you're doing well, and for you and everyone else who tunes in every week, or even if you're way behind, we really appreciate everyone that takes time to listen to our show, even if it's just for a little bit, and listen to what we have to say and join in our conversations. Now, without further ado, Tyson, why don't you open us up with our customary feel-good story of the week?
Thanks, David. Yeah, I got a feel-good story for everybody here this week. It comes from the NFL side of things, specifically the upcoming draft. We have the draft coming up on Thursday, so next week's podcast we'll definitely be talking a little bit about the NFL draft, kind of who and where and that sort of stuff. We'll talk a little bit about it later on today, hopefully, as well. So, but anyways, one of these guys who is going to be drafted probably around the first, second round is this guy. His name is Jalen Phillips. So just to give you a little bit of a brief understanding of Jalen Phillips, he was a 5-star prospect coming out of high school. He was an outside linebacker, defensive end. He was really good at getting to the quarterback and sacking the quarterback.
Right, so in other words, one of those modern 3-4 hybrid pass rusher types.
For sure. Like he was getting scholarships in the 10th grade, to Division I schools. Incredibly good, like incredibly gifted. ESPN had him tied for the first best player that recruit. He was ranked kind of third in some other places. So really good player, really good kind of a guy. He grew up with some musically inclined parents, like they were both musicians, and he traveled the world and that sort of stuff. So he also had a passion for music, which kind of picks up later on. And he decided that he was going to commit to UCLA. So he committed to UCLA in his freshman year. He gets 3.5 sacks in 6 games, which is pretty good. But unfortunately, then he got a concussion, and that ended his freshman year a little bit prematurely. And then Jalen Phillips experienced a second concussion actually that off season. He got into a car accident. He was actually riding his scooter when a car hit him and struck him, and he left like a human-sized dent in the fender of the car. So it broke.
And he's a big man too. He's probably fairly sized dent.
Superhuman-sized dent.
6'4", 240, right?
There
And he
you
gets
go.
thrown off, and he broke his arm, and he also recorded his second concussion. Now he comes back in the off season a little bit later into the season, trying to impress the new head coach, which is Chip Kelly, former head coach of the Eagles, and unfortunately he gets his third concussion in 2 years in UCLA. So it's really tough for him as an athlete. So interestingly enough, there was a lawsuit filed against UCLA, specifically under the previous head coach who had recruited Jalen Phillips, and the lawsuit was that there were players who were being forced into contact drills in practice and actually playing in games while still experiencing concussion-like symptoms. So basically what was happening is that this coach was kind of forcing players to play even though they were still hurt, and forcing players to play through pain. So that's what this lawsuit is about. So when we kind of look a little bit at Jalen Phillips' career, there was some history and controversy of concussions going on at UCLA before Chip Kelly got there. So what happened, I'm not sure if it was because of this lawsuit or this incident, or if this was a long-standing rule, but at the UCLA, the school has a policy that if you get 3 concussions, you have to medically retire from sports. So, like, you can't come back. This is different than a medical redshirt, where if a player breaks his leg in the first or second game of the year, then you can apply for a medical redshirt. You gain an extra year of college eligibility. You can come back and you can play football or the sport you were in the next year. No, with medical medical retirement, you have to. It's supposedly this be. It's an incident that you can't come back from. That's basically what it's for, is that you're expected not to be able to play. Now, miraculous comebacks can be approved, and under the situation, the player doesn't lose scholarship, so to speak, but the school does not have to keep that player on their roster, and it doesn't count against their athletic scholarships. So the player, even though has to medically retire, still gets to have the full benefits of the education. So what happened after this is Jalen Phillips kind of had to go through a little bit of a soul-searching type of life story, and he eventually decided that he was going to pursue another passion, which is music. You know, his parents are both musicians, so he went to the LA Community College and he actually got a certificate in audio engineering. He was very successful in this field, and you know, he was, you know, really good at helping producing music and being a part of iHeartRadio, but he still had that desire for football. So after, you know, kind of a year at community college, there were some other head coaches that kind of got in contact with him and said, hey, are you still interested in playing football? And Jalen Phillips, you know, he kind of thought about it and he was like, yeah, I really want to get back into football. And after choosing kind of maybe looking at Stanford or USC, he eventually chose University of Miami because of their music program to go back and play football.
The U, if I'm not
The
mistaken.
U. So he goes to Miami, sits out the first year just as a redshirt year to get his muscle mass. He had to put on another 50 pounds in order to play football again. And in this past year, he was kind of expected to be a defensive lineman, in and out, kind of a rotational player, kind of a third down pass
rush specialist.
Yeah,
yes.
that kind of a guy. But because of the pandemic, another player who's going to get drafted, Gregory Rousseau, opted out this year. So Jalen Phillips gets a starting role. So in 10 games this year, Jalen Phillips had 8 sacks, 15 and a half TFLs, tackles for loss, and the most important thing, no injuries. So Jalen Phillips, he's expected to go in the first 2 rounds of this draft, late first, kind of in that second round, and hopefully he has a very good career and that he stays healthy. So.
Well, that's a fantastic comeback story so far. I think we all understand how hard concussions in particular are to come back from, and also how subjective they are, right? Now, obviously, every person who gets concussion is deeply affected by it, but we can't overstate the fact that Jalen Phillips is the exception, not the rule here. 3 concussions in a short span of years. It's very hard to come back from when playing high-level sports is concerned. You know, Cam used to play high school football, and you were telling us about a couple of gruesome injuries that your teammates went through.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. There's actually one of our players that we had. I won't name his name, of course, but he was our middle linebacker. The actual number, I remember in one game he had 7 sacks.
No.
Yes.
That's so many. That's so good.
You wanted a blitz, he was there. So he was just incredible, and just the way he controlled, he was
through those A gaps, huh?
Yeah, he was right up the middle, and it was just unfortunate because it was our senior year, and the very first game of our senior year, as he was doing, he chased down, 5 yards, got pushed up, he went right to the sidelines, right where the chains were, met up with this guy, grabbed him, pulled him down, went down really awkwardly though, and his leg basically snapped into tibula and fibula. They're supposed to look like a diamond, ended up looking like a squiggly line.
Wow.
It was really horrendous. So it's a typical football play. You don't expect it. That there's definitely that risk involved. But mentioning about concussions, There was a player who actually I played with. His name again I will not mention, but he played with us for the first 2 years, and again in senior year, he had to actually basically hang up the cleats. He couldn't play anymore because he had 2 concussions in the preseason.
Oh
Wow.
And it's unfortunate because coach kept saying you can't be driving with your head down. It's gonna come back to get you.
Ryan Shazier found that out the hard way too.
He did.
So it is unfortunate, but that's the thrill of it. But there is always a downside. But
Right.
that was, again, thank you for sharing that story. That was awesome. But
And I think I speak for everyone when I say good luck, Jalen. Take care of your body, and we hope you have a successful career in the NFL and that you're able to make a lot of money and play this game and provide for yourself and your family, considering what you've gone through. Now, before we move on, it sort of occurs to me, Cam, that the people don't know that much about you. Like, we briefly kind of introduced you, and it was kind of a belated thought. I was sort of raring to get started, but just to be clear, you don't play football anymore.
I don't anymore.
So where are you from, and what are you doing with your life now?
So born and raised Calgary. Really, really blessed. I'm actually a 3rd-generation Calgarian. There's not a lot that are out there today,
Wow.
which is awesome. And it even goes back to 5 generations for Alberta. So
Wow.
we're a very Canadian family, and it's awesome. But yeah, I don't play football anymore except for on the weekends with a few friends if we
Sure.
can, pass the ball around. But,
I know what you mean.
Yeah, but no, it's good. I work as a courier for DHL Express. Delivering packages out there. Doesn't sound very exciting. It's not the most exciting.
But in a pandemic, it suddenly becomes way more important than anyone ever thought.
It's
I
central
never thought I'd be a
services.
frontline worker. It's something very, very interesting on that aspect. But I do have to break the news to everyone here, as there is a Leafs fan that is very present here.
Oh my gosh!
I-
Well, actually, I'm feigning surprise for our audience. There was an ulterior motive of Tyson and I inviting this gentleman on our show this episode, and why don't you tell the people what that reason is?
I bleed red for the Montreal Canadiens.
Boo!
It's such a historic franchise that did all the winning. Not while I was alive, unfortunately. I was born in 1994. The last cup was 93. So I don't blame myself as being the sole reason that they haven't won a cup. But,
It's a reason.
it's a reason to say the least, So it's out there now. I gotta break the news.
A disclaimer to those of you listeners out there: if midway through this broadcast you just start to hear sounds of scuffling and things breaking, please dial 911. Because
Don't
these two
actually.
gentlemen are both
Don't
a lot...
actually.
Don't actually.
No,
do
I'm
that.
just kidding. All I'm saying is both these guys are a lot bigger than I am, and as a Flames fan, I kind of caught in the middle of this rivalry, so...
Can only mediate so much before it gets out of hand.
Yes,
right?
but obviously we're joking, and we also don't plan to stage any audio-only fights on this show.
At this
not
point.
at this point in time. That's not what we are doing here. But thanks for telling everyone a bit about yourself, Cam. Like I said, you and I have known each other pushing 10 years at this point.
Yeah.
10. Actually, no, it was because we met at Camp Evergreen.
Yes.
In 2011. It's again, I told you guys about this in the first episode, introducing myself, but this Bible camp in Sullivan, Alberta, hour and change outside of Calgary, is a place that really helped make me who I am today. And while not everyone listening is a Christian or a follower of Christ, I'll tell you what, it's a place that, and right, like honestly, I'm obligated to do a little bit of a tangent, a little bit of a plug here once again, but you know what, it's a place that was just so welcoming. Working there really taught me how to be a man, taught me how to be a teammate, taught me to work hard. Those are all things that I'm taking forward now into my sports journalism career in different ways. And Cam, we met there. I was in high school. You had been a staff member there for quite some time, and we both stuck around this place so long that we have worked together. We have led youth group together at church, and it's just very special that in this weird time we're able to come together once again and talk sports, and that's something that we all love, and Tyson, you as well. So anyways, personal news aside, let's talk about hockey. And I have a feel-good story as well, although it's not so much of a traditional feel-good story as it is just an immensely fun factoid from the world of hockey, and I'll share that with you folks now before we get into the meat of our first topic. So, Sportsnet aired a couple of graphics over the course of the Calgary Flames Montreal Canadiens game yesterday. That would have been this Monday, and so the first graphic is fairly standard. It's talking about Flames goaltender Jacob Markstrom and the number of goals he's allowed in the last 12 games and where he allowed them, what quadrant of the net. No one scored on his 5-hole in the last 12 games. That's pretty good.
Okay.
Conversely, he's been most vulnerable. High blocker, 14 goals, gone up there. High glove, he's allowed 7 goals there. Low glove, 3 goals. Low blocker, 5 goals. That's sort of been the recent shot chart on him, and obviously every goaltender will vary, and this is it's very, very subjective. It depends on not only your natural skills as a goalie, but also who you're facing, what game plan they're employing against you, and of course the ever fickle puck luck, what ends up going in the net versus what you somehow pad stack on, right? So then they, however, turn their attention to Kelly Hrudey, who is a former NHL goaltender. He is now a color commentator on Hockey Night in Canada and Sportsnet. This gentleman is 60 years of age, an Edmontonian, and he played from 1981 to 1998 for the New York Islanders, Los Angeles Kings, and San Jose Sharks. Now, if you love hockey and if you are acquainted from the past, or rather with the past that hockey came from, you will know that in the 80s and 90s, it was decidedly easier to score goals than it is now. And
yeah, I mean, Gretzky had a lot of goals in that era, and I don't want to take anything away from that, but the pads were small and the nets were big.
The pads were small, the nets were big, and most goaltenders played this very anarchic stand-up style of goaltending in which instead of covering their angles like they would in today's game, it's a lot of raw athleticism, kind of almost backyard hockey, kind of flailing. Dominic Hasek is the master of this and will always be the king in this department.
You mean to say that Grant Fuhr didn't have amazing technical skills?
I can neither confirm nor deny that claim. Anyways, again, just for those of our listeners who aren't super knowledgeable about hockey, the point is that it was decidedly much easier to score goals in the 80s and 90s than it is now, and again, there were some incredibly talented, legendary players in those eras, but at the same time, it was just a goaltending style thing. It's a game style thing that has evolved a lot since then. Anyways, Kelly Hrudey, who played in this era, allowed 2,174 goals.
Oh, Kelly.
In his career, which is
it's a bit.
It's a bit. There's no context attached to this, but still, it's a bit. Here, however, is the breakdown of the quadrants of the net that he was vulnerable in, and keep in mind, this is an entire career.
Yeah.
High glove. Tyson, guess how many goals he's let in ever high glove?
Out of 2,000?
Out of the 2,000 odd.
I don't know, 300?
1.
No.
1?
1. Low glove. Give me another
500.
Guess. 1.
No.
High blocker.
1?
It's 1. Low blocker. Come on, last guess, man.
1.
And 2,173 5-hole.
Oh,
no way.
No. There's
this
no way.
Is
close up that 5-hole.
It's freakish. This is arcadish. I mean, it's not even arcadish. You probably couldn't replicate this in NHL 21 if you tried for hours and hours and hours.
That has to be a meme. It can't be real.
Well, listen, all I can tell you, and that Cam can verify this, it showed up on a Sportsnet broadcast, so either they're messing with everyone, or this was a truly odd turn of events over close to 20 years for this beloved goaltender.
Kelly Rudy was also on the sportscasting. Like, he was there. So unless he would have made his own sort of sadistic joke against himself. Oh boy.
Oh man.
This is
Poor Kelly.
Poor Kelly.
hashtag the more you know. That's really what I can say about a bizarre factoid such as this one, and we hope that y'all out there are as befuddled by this as we are. Now, with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, it is time for the main event of the evening. It is time for the pay-per-view that y'all have tuned in for. Although this is a free show, so that's great. So it's not really a pay-per-view, but
The free for view.
on one hand, yeah, there you go.
Free for listen, I guess.
Free for listen.
It's on Spotify.
Maybe we should trademark that. Anyways, okay.
Get our own T-shirts.
Hey, our show gets successful enough, we're gonna need some T-shirts and some merchandise.
There we go.
Some logos, but anyways, without further ado, like I said, the main attraction of the evening, in the red corner, literally and otherwise, we have Cam Coates standing roughly 6 feet tall, weighing a number of pounds over 200 that I won't specify. 245? Honesty. You know what? I like that. All right. Anyways, standing at 6 feet even, weighing 245 pounds, in the red corner, Cam Coates representing the Montreal Canadiens. And over here in the literal blue corner, standing 6 feet 4 inches tall, weighing probably about 240 pounds as well.
Maybe a couple pizzas on top of
Maybe
that.
a couple of pizzas on that. I'm gonna say, listen, I'm gonna be generous. I'm gonna say 248, and we're gonna leave it at that.
Thanks.
Is Tyson Workington, and for the next little while, these two gentlemen are gonna treat you to a unmoderated, mostly impromptu conversation about the state of the Toronto Maple Leafs this year versus the state of the Montreal Canadiens this year, and I'm gonna sit here and play the Ron McClain role and essentially act like
Nothing's happening.
nothing's happening to me, and I will occasionally say a few words. Take it away, gentlemen.
Okay, well, I will start off with this. Here in Calgary, we have the fan 960. In Montreal, it's the fan 690. It's slightly different, of course. Interesting fact there. I listen to the radio quite frequently, of course. This is how I'm going to start this conversation off. With the lead-off, they led with this phrase. The Montreal Canadiens could not have picked a worse time to meet up with the Toronto Maple Leafs. Hearing that statement, what is your first thought on that?
I mean, yeah, it sounds pretty accurate. You know, like the Leafs are they're coming out of their slump this season. Like as a whole, they suffered and they struggled a little bit. They got mad and they got they got beat 2 in a row against the COVID Canucks. And then right, like anytime it's an emotional game for the other team and it's against the Leafs, you know the Leafs are gonna lose. So like you just do.
That's an interesting statement.
Right? So the Leafs, they lose 2 to Vancouver right out of quarantine, and then they're mad, and then they play the Jets and they beat the Jets and they play very well, and now they're coming on a break here, and now we get a whole bunch of games against you guys. So in the season complex, right now is not a very nice time to probably be playing the Leafs, but also usually, like you said beforehand, before we started recording, you only play about 4 or 5 games a year against us. But now because of the division, the North Division, you get to play us 9 times, 10 times?
10 times.
10 times, and I'm looking forward to it.
And just for some context for our audience out there, Maple Leafs have 5 wins, 3 losses, and 2 overtime or shootout losses in their last 10. So overall, the numbers are in their favor. They are atop the North Division. Overall, 30 wins, 13 losses, 5 overtime losses, 65 points will put them 7 ahead of the Edmonton Oilers for the division lead as of Tuesday morning. Montreal, meanwhile, has been treading water down in this number 4 spot. They have lost 6 of their last 10, 21-17, and 9 overall, although they did win a big one over my Flames. last night that gives them a bit of breathing room, and I have some grievances to air about that a little later. Nonetheless, these two teams have gone in differing directions this year.
To say the least. You know, it's been a rough ride because coming out of the beginning of this season, you know, you see the acquisitions and the loading up. Montreal actually spent their cap space, which was
wow.
huge. I know.
Imagine a billion-dollar franchise actually spending money on players.
Imagine the most tight-fisted GM finally being like, let's go. And it's all out there. And signings like Jake Allen, which a lot of people are like, he got almost $15 million in goaltending. And I say, you know what? Look where Carey Price is right now. He's not rushing to come back.
Mm-hmm.
He's had injuries. Since 2017, he's been struggling with those injuries. That's not going to change.
Mm-hmm.
They address the goaltending situation. They bring up a guy who is a bona fide number one goaltender before he lost his job to Jordan Binnington,
yes.
which he actually did win back in the last playoff series that St. Louis played. So, Jake Allen has been great for us. Players like Josh Anderson, Tyler Toffoli, fantastic additions for us. Joel Edmondson, who currently still...
Another former Blue that took his game to the next level.
Exactly, who I believe, last I saw, might be down now, but Joel Edmondson was still leading the league in plus-minus. We'll get a fact check on that, and we'll have to see. So all these things led up, you know, and we come to the beginning of the season, and Montreal just goes on a tear. Montreal in February is averaging 5.1 goals per game, which is unbelievable.
That is a lot of offense.
Going into, they still had about 4.5 goals again. Montreal has not been offensive.
No.
Unless your name is Brendan Gallagher, you're not scoring, and that's usually what happens. Say for Thomas Tatar having a career year last year.
Wait, you mean to tell me that old Eric Stahl can no longer be relied upon as a top offensive threat?
He got a goal in his overtime debut, and that has been all he's produced.
Congratulations.
Fun fact with Eric Stahl, unfortunately, he's still doing better statistically than he was with Buffalo, but he, in the games following that overtime winning game, he had a -6 and nothing else to show.
-6.
Saying that, it was a bit of a tough stretch. Unfortunately, Montreal does not match up well against the Darryl Sutter system, which they should be getting comfortable in closer games because realistically, Montreal will be in the playoffs. Don't know how long they'll be there for, but I'm just holding on to what they did last year against Pittsburgh.
That's the thing, right? If you have a healthy Carey Price, you never know. You never know.
You never know. And unless Carey throws a total stinker, lays an egg in the playoffs, I can still hold on to that. For those of you who may not be familiar, as David mentioned earlier with the NHL, Pittsburgh was expected to just roll over Montreal last year. There was a different format. Montreal was the 24th team who just barely snuck into the playoffs.
Literally the last team.
Literally the last team, did not deserve to be there whatsoever. The very first game, Pittsburgh outshot Montreal in the first period 20-6. 0-0 going into the second period.
Yeah.
And that was Price putting a force
That was
field
Price putting up the force field, being incredible. The reason we won that playoff series was purely because of Carey Price. So as you said, with a healthy Carey Price, anything's possible, and it's good. Now, I have some more numbers to throw at you.
I'm ready.
Okay? Explain to me this. The Leafs last year had this is incredible. Their power play last year, their whole season, was 31.7%, which is almost the best. The only other better power play in history was, of course, the 77 Montreal Canadiens. Having the Blonde Demon on their team really helped out with that one. So, this year things have taken a dip, to say the least.
No kidding.
If we go back to March 11th, dating a span of 18 games, Toronto is officially a league worst 2 for 46 on the power play.
That's otherworldly, and not in a good way.
I just was wondering, you watch the Leafs on a nightly basis. What's your angle on this?
Yeah, no kidding. So, for context, one of those 2 goals was on a 5-minute major, which came at the 4-minute and 22nd of that 5-minute major. So
just barely
sneaking into that 5-minute power play. The other one the Leafs had given up a shorthanded goal.
And so essentially they were just getting it back.
Essentially, it was just we gave up one, now we got to go get one back.
Wow.
So,
For a team with Austin Matthews, Mitch Marner, William Nylander, John Tavares, even at his advanced age, Joe Thornton in that kind of a setting.
Wayne
Simmons, TJ Brody, Morgan Riley. Although, Tyson, we were talking about this the other day, and you said something to me that I thought had some merit, is that it's mental, and that sometimes, just as in the case with every sport, confidence can come and go, and when you run into adversity, sustained adversity like this, you were telling me that sometimes it snowballs. And do you think that's been happening here? And that might be a factor.
Yeah, I really think so. I think it's confidence. I really do. Like, you get going, like, okay, you give up a shorthanded goal, and then you get one back. Like, nobody is on that power play going, yes, we're killers, you know? We did so good. No, that's just not what's the confidence.
They're hanging their head trying to hide from Keith when they get back to the bench.
Exactly.
Yep.
They're like, oh, man, we let one in, now we got to go get one, right? And then, like, the 5-minute power play, the 5-minute major that was actually from the Zach Hyman injury on the kneeing on Alex Edler. Like, that was a broken play where Austin Matthews took a swing at it and it kind of chipped over the goalie. Not exactly a setup, not exactly the most exciting way to score, or not exactly a way to build the most confidence is to have your best player kind of get a lucky one. So I think when you look at the Leafs, like, their talent suggests that they should score more. And I think that they should definitely be better. And it's disappointing to see that because it's something to worry about going into the playoffs. Special teams are extremely important. They can turn the tide of a season or turn the tide of the playoffs. Like if you get really, really hot on the penalty kill, all of a sudden you're not necessarily as afraid to take penalties and you can play more aggressive. Or if you get really, really hot on the power play, then you can, kind of ride that power play, make the other team pay, and get through a tough series. But if you don't have those special teams going like power play, penalty kill, it's going to be a problem. So I think it's confidence because there's no shortage of talent on this team.
Not at all. I mean, when you have 4 forwards almost making up half your cap, I would hope that you're going through. Following up with that actually as well, is Nylander still in COVID? Do you know what's going on with Nylander?
So what happened with Nylander is that he was with somebody who came in contact with somebody who tested positive. So Nylander,
friend of a friend.
So it was a friend of a situation.
Yeah.
So there's some rumors that maybe Nylander wasn't being as safe as he probably should have been, because the NHL players outside of, playing games on the road, they kind of have to be locked in their hotels for the most part, right? So maybe there was a situation where William Nylander left the hotel for a reason and hang out with somebody, and then that somebody came in contact with somebody who had COVID. So it was a precautionary reason why, because they weren't sure if it was like the person that Nylander was with tested positive. Eventually that person did eventually find out they tested negative, and Nylander was able to come back. So he's been back for a few games, and then he missed a meeting and almost got benched.
He's an interesting specimen, that one. I really like to relate him with Jonathan Drouin.
Oh, man.
Where they have so much skill and so much potential locked in, but they only show up when they want to. They're only there when they want to. I'm sorry, I can say this for Drouin, I'm sure you can say it for Nylander. Where's the back checking? Where are you at?
I mean, yeah, like Nylander is not known for his defense.
Neither is Drouin. Though,
would you put Alex Galchenyuk in that category too?
Yes, and purely because I don't think a guy can jump between so many different teams without having something be wrong. Yeah. Now, I always liked Galchenyuk. I was kind of upset that we did trade him because I know, he's coming off of 30 goals. Everything didn't look great. But then we had Domi. Domi had a career year. That was awesome. And then since then, he's kind of fallen off a cliff. He's gone through Minnesota, through Pittsburgh, through Arizona, Ottawa, and now he's on Toronto. And so going through 6 teams in the span of, a year and a half, I believe?
2 years, I think.
Yeah.
That's
I'm happy
good.
for him that he's having success, which this is the last stand. If you can't score with guys like Matthews and Marner, then you don't belong in the NHL anymore. There's Unless you're Scott Sabrin, as we were talking before this, who likes to run over my Laval Rockets, goaltenders.
We will come back to that rabbit trail later.
Yes. But anyways, yeah, there is that issue. But in saying that there's that similarity between Drouin and Nylander, they don't necessarily need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You have players who will do that. You mentioned Hyman. I have my Gallagher.
Mm-hmm.
The same guys that do the same things that will get into hard-nosed areas
Mm-hmm.
and do the hard things, so that way the skill guys can actually come up and do something with it.
Right, but for me, the issue is not everybody needs to be a two-way forward, obviously, but the thing is, scoring goals at the NHL level is not just you're going to 1-on-3, 1-on-4 your way past everybody.
Unless you're Connor McDavid.
Unless you're Connor McDavid.
Sorry,
right. But
He's the only one that can do
he's
that.
the only one that can do that.
He's special.
and Pavel Datsyuk before him. But anyways,
Oh.
my point though being is that attention to detail matters a lot more at the highest level of sport than it does at the lower levels. And granted, even though I haven't specifically watched much of Drouin and I haven't specifically watched much of Nylander, I have seen a fair bit of Johnny Gaudreau. And we talked about Calgary's issues at length in a previous episode a few weeks ago, but I just bring up Gaudreau to say that it really is a mental thing, kind of like you were saying, Tyson, in a different context, is that a player like Johnny Gaudreau, when the puck's not going in the net for him, when he's holding the puck trying to make plays and it's not working out for him, he doesn't seem willing or able to lock in and do the little things to help his team in less noticeable but still meaningful ways, right? You don't have to be Patrice Bergeron. You don't have to be Jonathan Taves, and obviously guys like that are very special for a reason. But I think for guys like Drouin and guys like Gaudreau and guys like Nylander, the thing is, it's kind of a mindset of, listen, the puck's not going in for me. Listen, I'm not going to be able to dance past these defensemen every single time. Listen, I'm not beating the goalie with my shot so far through this game. Am I willing to, if not back check hard, put myself in a good position to take a breakout pass? When I'm in the neutral zone, instead of trying to lug it in myself, make one more pass so that my line mate can skate it in and we can get something going, right? And when you are in the offensive zone, you can't let yourself get frustrated. Things happen very quickly in the NHL, and a split-second lapse in concentration could be the difference between a bumper one-timer that scores and you whiffing on the puck or the goalie having an extra second to respond to it. So that's just my 2 cents, as certainly not a hockey expert, but someone who's watched hockey for a long time and someone who has essentially looked into and read about, well, okay, what makes plays, right? And what differentiates success from failure at the highest level. And I'm sure you gentlemen would agree it is far more than just raw talent at this point.
It really is. I mean, again, we were talking before the show about TJ Brody. His name came up. And what doesn't show up on the stat sheets is the breakout pass.
Yeah.
And TJ Brody is very, very good at that. Very, very incredible. But that's just it. You can't have raw talent. You need to have some sort of other element, whether it's that aggression, that bit of, the cliche that everybody knows, you used it last week as well, is the sandpaper. It's the grit. That puck. Sometimes the dump and chase is the only way you're going to get things in. You got to get the puck in deep. You got to get these guys tired, so you can cycle things around. Speaking from Montreal's perspective, specifically on the power play as well, teams know that Montreal does not cycle the puck very well, and so with that, it happens all the time where they will box out and they will have such high intensity pressure to get the puck out of the zone. Let me tell you, Montreal's power play is just a skating drill. They get in the zone, it comes out. They get in the zone, it comes out. They get in the zone, it comes out.
It reminds me of the Calgary power play of the mid-2010s that I never want to go back to.
This is the power play we've had.
Yeah, the Toronto power play now.
So, I was not making fun of your statistics, just bringing up your numbers, but my numbers haven't been great either. In March, Montreal had the best power play in the NHL.
Okay.
33%.
That's really nice.
It was incredible. Toffoli was going, which he's incredible. Thomas Tatar was going. Everything was going well. Petrie was racking up the points.
He's been a monster this year.
He's been so good for us, and then Darnell Nurse is like, hey, I got more goals than you guys now. Thanks. April, can you take a guess what the power play percentage is for Montreal in April?
Second worst, because only Buffalo is worse. No, only Toronto's worse. That's what I'm thinking.
I'm going to say, let's go 17%.
Try 7.9%.
Oh, boy.
Literally horrendous. Before they scored the power play goal last night, they were 1 for 26. So
wow.
Not looking great. Before that, they were okay. Not quite, 2 for 46, but it's just something that gets under your skin and gets through that. And a lot of that factor comes to me, okay, how much of this is the absence of Brendan Gallagher? A guy who, again, will be in front of the net. He's only 5'8", but boy, can he screen a goaltender.
He doesn't care that he's 5'8".
He fights for position.
He plays so much bigger than he is.
He plays so much bigger. That's why every year he leads Montreal in goals, is because you go to YouTube and type up Brendan Gallagher goal highlights. They're all just tips and stabbing it in, and they're not nice. They never are.
He graduated from the Patrick Hornquist school of scoring goals in the NHL.
Every goal he has, he deserves, because he has worked so hard for that. So another stat with this as well.
Actually, no, I'm gonna.
Oh yeah, hit me with it.
Just before you move on with this, I wanted to seg back into that Joel Edmondson plus-minus thing, but instead of dropping it in cold, I want to invite you to talk about something else we were going to discuss on the show, because it more naturally comes up that way. Jake Allen and the lack of run support that he's getting.
It is very frustrating, because there's many times watching this season I have thought to myself, man, we do not deserve Jake Allen, which I've been saying about Carey Price for years.
And you don't, but
we don't.
It's okay.
We brought Jake Allen in to help Carey Price, but it's this unfortunate paradox where they don't play for him, and I don't understand what happens, what goes on. And even Caden Primo played over the weekend. He's our prospect goaltender. He's going to be the number one eventually, but he came in, and Montreal did the same thing. When Jake Allen is in net for Montreal, they average less than 2 goals per game.
Wow, that's
scoring.
not good enough.
That you can't expect your goalie
to do sub 1.
You can't. It is impossible. And it's not even from the offensive perspective, but the defense, everything falls off. And I watch these games and I just wonder what happens. And it's unfortunate, because Jake Allen has this run where he's literally got these great numbers, a 930, 940, 950 save percentage, but he's losing every game. He's won 2 in his last 11, because Montreal just does not.
Translation, a lot of 1-goal and 2-goal losses.
A lot of 1-goal and 2-goal losses.
Mm-hmm.
And then a sprinkling of 5-0 from Winnipeg in there every now and then.
Hopefully from Toronto.
And we'll see. The last game, we'll see. So it is unfortunate. But if Montreal doesn't do that, then it comes through. If Jake Allen has a bad game, which he's had 1 or 2, and he's very much entitled to have that, Montreal needs to have his back. And they don't. That game I just mentioned specifically, a 5-0 loss, Jeff Petrie, one of our best defensemen, was a -5 in that game.
Ooh. Now, he's been having an unreal year.
He's been having an unreal, absolutely. In the beginning, he was in Norris conversation constantly, not because of purely his points, but he was leading defenseman in goals and points, and everything was going well for him, but his defensive play was looking incredible as well. But the defensive play actually falls better on his partner, Joel Edmondson, who, my goodness, that's one of the acquisitions I mentioned earlier, who we got in free agency, and he has been stellar for us. Now, time to maybe fact check this and see if it's correct.
So Joel Edmondson, now the reason why I invited you to talk about Jake Allen and this lack of run support the Habs have been experiencing is because it is directly related to the issue of plus-minus. Now, plus-minus is a controversial statistic.
Really is.
It is something that should be contextualized, and that's what we're trying to do. And also, it relates to the amount of goals being scored, which is why I asked you to talk about Jake Allen and this lack of scoring before we bring it back to Joel Edmondson. Now, once more, for those who don't understand what plus-minus is, every time you are on the ice when you or your teammate scores a goal, that you get +1. And every time you're on the ice when the other team scores while you're on the ice, you don't have to have made a mistake that led to the goal. You just have to be on the ice when the goal goes in. You get a minus. And so essentially
not including power play or shorthanded. So power play.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Special teams are excluded from that.
Yeah, they don't count. So if you get a power play goal, it's not a +1. If you're killing a penalty and they let in, it's not a -1.
Thank you. So 5-on-5 performance specifically. Now the reason why this is a controversial statistic is because, just like I said, a lot of things can happen in the game of hockey. You could be the winger doing your job at the top of the zone waiting to take a breakout pass. Your defenseman coughs it up and it leads to a slot shot that goes in. That's not your fault, right? And this can happen a lot in hockey. So by itself, plus-minus is not a definitive stat when it comes to evaluating performance of a player. But when we get very significant differentials in plus-minus, particularly relative to the amount of points a player is themselves scoring and contributing to their own plus-minus, that's where the conversation becomes a little interesting and Edmondson fits in. So finally, after all this context, here's the actual fact check. Joel Edmondson is tied for third currently as of Tuesday morning, a +26 with Shea Theodore and Mark Stone. But here is the thing. Shea Theodore, who's a mobile, talented defenseman for the Vegas Golden Knights, has scored 40 points himself, +26. Mark Stone, one of his Vegas teammate, one of the Knights' best offensive threats, 53 points, leading in part to his +26. Joel Edmondson, however, if you know hockey and you watched the Blues a few years ago, he is a pure stay-at-home, big physical shutdown defenseman who takes care of his own end, and this is what makes this impressive. 11 points +26. That, I personally believe that yes, plus-minus is an iffy stat by itself, but when this happens, when you only score 11 of your own points and you are a +26, tied for third in the entire NHL, you are doing something right.
Particularly on a team that doesn't score a lot.
Absolutely. I mentioned earlier in the season, Montreal was averaging just under 5 goals a game, which was
a lot.
unrealistic to maintain for the season.
And 2.5 of those goals a game were to Foley.
Exactly. What a season he's having. But I go through and I look at it now, and Montreal's dropped off, and they're in the bottom percentile of the NHL now with their goals per game. I'm not sure the exact stats, but I know the last time I saw it, it was under 2 goals a game again. And that's just not going to fly. No. That may work when you get to a playoff atmosphere, but you need to get to the playoffs first, and that's the most important thing for it. So, again, I said we don't deserve Jake Allen, we don't deserve Joel Edmondson, because he's someone who does not show up on the stat sheet every night, but my goodness, is he doing so much behind the scenes that you don't see.
And it's very impressive, the trajectory of his development as a player, because in 2017, 2018, 2019, when he was playing with the St. Louis Blues, he was a number 6, number 7 sometimes defenseman who wasn't always able to stay in the lineup come playoff time. Oftentimes the Blues would swap him out with Robert Bertuzzo, another big physical defenseman, but he really was, for the most of his time in St. Louis, he was not near the top 4. He was not a Jay Bouwmeester. He was not a Pietrangelo, certainly. He was not a Colton Parayko, although he did play 5 of 7 games in the 2019 Stanley Cup Final when the Blues won. But again, to go from that to a place where not only is he an NHL regular now, but he is really been one of the most reliable defensemen in the NHL by certain metrics is very, very impressive, and props to him, and he's definitely seems to be coming into his own, still on the right side of 30, 27 years old. Before we move on to the rest of the Leafs Hab stuff, I just wanted to sort of finish out this plus-minus discussion, because we're here, we might as well tell the folks who number 1 and number 2 in plus-minus in the NHL are. And I think that this is a bit of a detour, but a bit of an interesting conversation, because, again, the difference between those two. Second in the NHL in plus-minus is someone that we probably recognize. His name's Leon Draisaitl. +27. Now, that's not bad until you consider the fact that he scored 66 of his own points. And Tyson, you and I were actually talking about this before the show. Leon Draisaitl is not that good defensively, and he's gotten better this year, but he certainly is nowhere near even what an Austin Matthews has become now. He is a pure offensive forward, and yeah, plus 27 is great, but 66 of your own points. By the way, that's 66 in 46 games. He's scoring at a torrid pace. That's definitely pumping up those tires a little bit. The first place candidate in plus minus, however, as of Tuesday morning, would gentlemen like to take a guess who that is?
I already know.
Yes, because
Okay.
you checked,
Take it
because
away
you're
then.
sneaky.
It's Alec Martinez.
LA Kings
No
former
way.
Stanley Cup winning defenseman Alec Martinez
He's on
now.
Vegas now.
First of all, the fact that Vegas has 3 guys in the top 6 of plus minus, it's a bit of an interesting
Tells you
thing to
something.
take note.
They're a pretty good team.
And here's the thing, Alec Martinez 26 points, plus 28. He is doing a lot of the right things on the ice, if this is any indication, and he's certainly been very reliable in his own end, and it's just something that I find interesting to think about when it comes to how this works, right?
Mm-hmm. You know, I it's just a small little tangent here. Mentioning the name Alec Martinez, I won't forget. It's probably one of my favorite Stanley Cup winning goals. Is the Alec Martinez goal.
That's a good one.
But also my heart breaks for Henrik Lundqvist in that one. But I just wanted to bring that up and say, you know, seeing
I was definitely rooting for the Rangers that year.
Yes, absolutely. But there's nothing like seeing an overtime goal to clinch a series at home. You know, it's gone through that. But anyway, sorry. I'll let you move on and see what you got for.
Well, so here's what I want to talk about. Like, you mentioned Jonathan Drouin, and I remember there was a press conference here with Jonathan. Now, for those of you who may not know, Jonathan Drouin is tied on the Habs for this most paid forward on the team, and he only has 2 goals this year. Now, he was on a press conference, and somebody asked Jonathan Drouin, and they asked him, so how has it been, like, you're struggling to score goals? And his response was, there's another stat category just to the right of it if you want to look. And those were his assist numbers. Now, he has 21 assists? Let me just check. Where is it? Points. And he has 21 assists. How do you respond to that?
I will put it to you
Like,
like
given
this.
the fact that this is not a 41-year-old Joe Thornton we're talking about,
no.
this split is fairly unusual.
See, the unfortunate thing with Jonathan Drouin, you look at, so we acquired Jonathan Drouin in the trade for Mikhail Sergachev.
Yeah.
Jonathan Drouin was the 3rd overall pick in 2013. So he had high expectations. And you know what? He ran with them. He played on a line with Steven Stamkos in Tampa Bay. And let me tell you, he tore up his rookie season. He played really well. He had multiple Calder votes, which is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
Carry that into the playoffs as well.
That was the year McKinnon also was very good, and he won the Calder.
Yeah, McKinnon, he's a pretty good player, you know.
Yeah.
So, no McKinnon on my team. If only he was, you know, we got him in a trade maybe.
Yeah.
But, nothing against Drouin, but you know, Sergachev has a cup now, so it's
Sergachev has also turned into one of a very, very, very good
a very
top four
reliable
defenseman.
and steady defenseman as well. So Drouin had this expectation, and you know, it was a hometown feel-good story. He's a Quebec boy coming back to Quebec, playing for the team he watched growing up. Very similar to the whole Wayne Train story. It was awesome. You know, things were going well. The unfortunate thing is the Montreal fan base is unforgiving, and
It sure is.
this is what doesn't make sense to me is there's no fans in the building, so there's not added pressure. Montreal has one of the worst home records going back for the last couple seasons now because they like playing away from Montreal. Because the thing about Montreal fans is you can't fool them. They know what's going on, you know. And with that, I've seen Jonathan Drouin have about, I believe, 7 or 8 breakaways this year.
Oh.
He scored on 2 of them. 2 of his goals are breakaway goals.
And he only has 2 goals.
So he is, and you get to this point where you just need to get one. And you know, even the last couple of games he was playing in, he's doing what he wouldn't do normally. He's in front of the net trying to whack the puck in, and he's missing it. He's doing these things unnaturally for himself. And so I look at it as Drouin is a very slick, nice playmaking winger. I don't think that he did have 27 goals. That's why everything looked incredible. Everything looked great. He has all this potential. But it all came back down on him when you look at, okay, now he's got 2 goals. but he's setting up the right plays. He's doing things right. I think, unfortunately, with Drouin, I don't expect him to score more, but his contract would suggest that he needs to score more. Because when you see, oh man, he's making, wow, that's a big number.
Yeah.
Oh, for 2 goals. Those are some expensive goals. Not as expensive as Jeff Skinner's goals, mind you, but
Oh my!
they're very expensive goals nonetheless.
Yeah.
So it was a very tough situation.
And what I will say is that when you were talking about Duran and his lack of success in the goal-scoring department and the fact that the puck is just not bouncing his way right now, you know who it reminded me of? Rick Nash in the 2014 playoffs, where now, for the record, Rick Nash is retired now, but he was a former number 1 overall pick, 40 goal power forward when in his prime, and when he went to the New York Rangers, they expected him to be a top 3 forward on that team, no doubt about it. Nash scored only 10 points and only 3 goals in 25 playoff games, which was that deep run that Alec Martinez ended up sending the Rangers home with that goal you were talking about. And this became a real topic of discussion that year, I remember, was that what's wrong with Rick Nash? Why is the puck not going in the net for him? Is he washed up? You can't be paying him $7.8 million, I think it was, per year for him to give you 10 points in 25 games in the playoffs. It's not
acceptable.
Good enough, and those are some really darn expensive goals when they come. Now, the counterpoint to that narrative, which interestingly enough draws back to some of my earlier comments about effort and doing little things, Rick Nash by the end of his career, the last few years, became a very good two-way winger. He learned to play in his own zone. He learned to play all 200 feet back and forth. He was on the first penalty kill unit and the first power play unit during this playoff run in particular, and for the bulk of his career in New York. He was a great veteran presence in the locker room, and he was at least a player who was willing to do those little things for the most part, make the small plays, pay attention to detail to at least help his team in other ways. Now, that year, it didn't end up working out for him. The following year in the playoffs, he scored 14 points in 19 games, which is definitely an improvement. And then essentially his goal scoring dried up for good because he could not stop getting concussions. There's an interesting full circle moment as well. Concussions ended up ending his career. But that's just what came to mind when you were talking about Drouin, and I think that from an outsider's point of view, I don't know if you agree with this or not, but from an outsider's point of view, it seems like he maybe could benefit from just maybe having a little bit of that attitude of, hey, there's another stat category next to goals that you might want to look, because he certainly contributed to offense in a way that, say, Rick Nash was not able to in that playoff run. That's a good thing. I mean, he's not gone cold. He's definitely still impacting the game and helping goals go in for his team. But I think for now, he just needs to bear down, continue to do the right things, shoot the puck, but only when it's smart to do so, and hopefully it'll turn around for him, right?
No, that's the truth. And mind you, right now he has been out of the lineup for the last couple of games. I think just with an illness. I don't know if it's COVID related or whatever, but it's tough. And I have seen he makes an effort, but again, Jonathan Drouin is not what you would call a tough guy or a big guy.
Mm-hmm.
So when he goes to body check someone like Zach Bogosian, it doesn't work out well for him.
No, really.
But I give him full credit for trying, and that's
Right.
the biggest thing I want to see is I want to see effort. I want to see you put that because there's one stat category that you can't find any sheet anywhere, nothing, and that's your confidence.
Yeah.
And in every sport, but I think especially with hockey, confidence is a killer.
Absolutely.
You mentioned you get hot on a power play, you get hot on a penalty kill, you get hot on anything, you start taking shots you wouldn't normally do. You're going to run up. You know what? Maybe I am going to try this little move against this player. I am going to do something.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're doing that every night and it's just not working, it's not working, you just need to get the proverbial monkey off your back,
Yeah. No, I understand what you're saying, and I have 2 Toronto examples. Like for confidence, like maybe you guys remember when William Nylander held out for that contract year that he had.
Yes.
Because he wanted to get the most amount of money as he possibly could. So he held out, and he held out into the season. Then he signed for a whole bunch of money, and then he came back into the lineup without practice training camp in mid-season, and obviously he didn't play particularly well in the first couple of weeks, so because he wasn't in game shape.
And he got roasted for it.
He got roasted for it, and then he completely lost all of his confidence, and he had his worst year ever as a pro hockey player, like not even close. So like that's an example of a player who really had no confidence, and he had a horrendous year because of it. Now on the other side, like John Tavares, earlier this year he was struggling to score. Like Sheldon Keefe said, oh, he's doing great things defensively for us. He's still setting up players. But John Tavares makes $11 million. He needs to get some points and get some goals here.
And he's just coming off a 40-goal season.
Exactly.
Right?
And John Tavares, he's a top center, and he should play like it. And his points should probably suggest he's getting paid comparably. So when he's not scoring, it's playing a little bit into his mind. And now this last week or so, he's gone on a hot streak here, and he's spotting some goals, and he's setting up William Nylander and Galchenyuk, and he's gotten a lot of points here in the last week, 10 days or so. And I saw him yesterday, or not yesterday, 2 days ago, playing against the Jets. He just absolutely walked Josh Morrissey, just dangled right by him, and he didn't score on the play, but I go, John Tavares 2 months ago would not have attempted that. But now that he's got all the confidence in the world, he makes that play and he gets a scoring chance because of it.
And one thing that I would like to add about confidence and how fickle it is and how much harder it is to get back once you've lost it versus what fans might expect. Let me just give you some more numbers. Going back to that 2014 playoff run where Rick Nash scored 3 goals and 7 points in 10 games, Rick Nash took 83 shots in that stretch of time. That is a 3.6 shooting percentage. And at that point, right, what do you do, right? This is a talented forward. This was before the injuries really started to take his goal scoring away for good. He has a great shot. He has size, skill. This is not lack of effort, right? We were talking about effort. This is not like 83 shots and 3 of them went in the back of the net. At that point, you can't blame a guy for letting it get into his head, because this means you are doing basically everything. It is bombs away from everywhere. You are trying your best to try to score goals to help your team win, and it just isn't happening. And I think that particularly when you're a star player, it might psychologically be even worse. Now, this is just an anecdotal take from me, but I do have a couple of examples that speak to this. Nash is one of them, and like we've established before, former 40-goal power forward, number 1 overall pick, was paid $7.8 million annually to score goals in game break, essentially, for New York, and it didn't always work out for him that way, and that one playoff run was in particular, he was fighting it. Jake Gensel, on the other hand, is not the biggest name in Pittsburgh. And he was a former third-round pick to boot, so no one really expected him to come in and be a top offensive forward. Right? He was drafted because Penguins saw some potential in him. They saw some skill, but they were like, no, we'll pick him when he's available because we think with time he might develop into an asset, but there were certainly not that many expectations on his shoulders, because after all, the Pittsburgh Penguins have 2 big centers named Crosby and Malkin that generally shoulder all the expectations in that city. But going back to the playoffs in particular, and I use the playoffs because this is where not only when the pressure gets higher, but the fans and the media are even harsher on you for failing to perform, so it adds that angle. In the 2017 playoff run, which I believe Pittsburgh won the Cup that year, Pittsburgh also played, Jake Gensel rather, he also played 25 games, like Rick Nash. Jake Gensel scored 13 goals, 8 assists, and 21 points in 25 games. Absolutely torrid, especially for a young former third-round pick. That is pretty darn good. And part of that is not just the physical factor of Crosby, Malkin, and Letang are just occupying defensive attention, giving you open ice, setting you up with great passes, and giving you space so you can score. but it is also, I think, that psychological factor. Jake Gensel realized that he's not the big horse in that room, but he realized that because of that, he was able to just go in and play free, right? And pardon me, he was able to just do his thing, let the game come to him, and have fun playing with these big superstars. Play on Sidney Crosby's wing. How great is that, right? And to bring this point full circle, Jake Gensel took only 52 shots in those 25 playoff games.
Wow.
Rick Nash took 83. But scoring 13 goals, that is a 25% shooting percentage
Incredible.
versus
That's so
3.6.
That's incredible.
Pro sports is a fickle thing sometimes, and hockey in particular is a fickle thing sometimes, and I make this point just to help the listener sort of realize how big an issue this can be.
I think so, and I think confidence is a huge thing, especially for young players, and maybe we could end on this. Cam, the Habs have some young players on their roster, Evans and Caulfield and Kotkaniemi and Suzuki. Maybe speak a little bit about what you like in them, what you see in them. How do you assess their game, and you think they're going to be any good in the future?
Well, the biggest thing I will say, which made me so happy...
Other than the fact that your fantasy hockey team is literally named Kotkaniemi's Mole.
Yep, that mole is gorgeous, I'll tell you right now. The one thing that made me super excited, which might sound a bit weird from a fan perspective, but Cole Caulfield made his NHL debut yesterday. Now, Cole Caulfield's pretty incredible. He grew up in the States playing he basically played through the U.S. Hockey leagues and the hockey ranks, and kind of just gradually worked his way up, and he eventually made it to college level before his draft eligibility. Came through, played some good college pro hockey. Everything looked really great. Everything was going his way. Montreal ended up drafting him 15th overall in the first round pick.
Yeah,
And
he was considered to be an elite goal scorer.
considered to be an elite goal scorer, which is very good. They were comparing him to the likes of players like Alex DeBrincat, who is also a very recent player, but had a 40-goal season with Patrick Kane on his wing. So pretty high praise, if you ask me, to go through with that. But the greatest thing that made me happy about Cole Caulfield, he came out and he did nothing wrong yesterday. Did he score any goals? No. Did he get any assists? No. He had a few shots on net, and he was a plus.
And he avoided being murdered by Milan Lucic.
And Sutter was trying to get Lucic to get rid of him. So, it's unfortunate that, for David, I guess, that didn't happen. But, it's quite good. To talk about some other ones, Jake Evans is someone who I don't think gets enough recognition. He's not as flashy. He doesn't do all those big things. But he's someone who has become steady for us. Jake Evans has only had one goal this year, and it was shorthanded. Which, by the way, in another stat category, Montreal leads the NHL in shorthanded goals this season with 9, which is pretty incredible.
That's really good.
Considering they had 7 in their first 15 games, I think it was. But obviously they got up. Now, Jake Evans is someone who, he's going to go in, he's going to win you a face-off, he's going to kill penalties, he's going to play. In the last 2 minutes of a game, you have this young presence that is killing off those crucial final minutes. In the 2-1 victory over Calgary that just happened very recently, which felt very much like a playoff game, Jake Evans was taking these draws. Now, again,
Very impressive.
He doesn't show up on the stat sheet. He doesn't have his face-off record isn't anything amazing either. It's no Philip Deneau, Claude Giroux, Sean Couturier face-off percentage.
Or Bergeron.
My goodness, he's good. He's got like a million Selkies. But he's someone that I can rely on. And he's growing into his own, and he's getting these things, and he's doing these things right. Now, Kotkaniemi is someone who I think was tough because he got drafted 3rd overall. Montreal's never drafted higher than 3rd overall in NHL history because we've been so good, I guess. That's the way to look at it. Edmonton with your 4 overall picks in like 10 years or whatever it was.
Fun fact, Calgary has never drafted above 4th overall.
Really?
Sam Bennett is
the highest draft pick you've ever had.
Since 1980.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's rough.
It kind of is.
We've had 2 3rd overall picks. Kotkaniemi, Alex Galchenyuk.
Yeah.
So,
it's a fickle game.
It's a fickle game, but anyways, Kotkaniemi, he came through. He had a great rookie season. 11 goals, over 30 points, looking promising. there's this thing that you guys might have heard of called the sophomore slump that everyone has gone through, and they've heard these things. Thankfully, it hasn't affected Nick Suzuki whatsoever. But with Kotkaniemi, he came out and they rushed him too much, which is something that we've seen some teams do particularly. I'm sorry to keep ragging on Edmonton, but they did it with Puljujarvi.
They did. They really
very
did.
poorly. And the Finnish Elite League, which using Puljujarvi as the example of Kotkaniemi, is very different from the NHL. Different than the National League. Different than the KHL. It's its own breed of medicine.
Different than the AHL minor league.
Kotkaniemi was literally lighting up the Finnish League, the Finnish Elite League, and it's so there was this pressure on him. So things didn't go well. He lost his confidence. He stopped shooting the puck. He was turning over pucks. He was doing things wrong. So what do? They finally sent him down to Laval. Goes to Laval. Has had a 10-game point streak. He was scoring. He was putting up these numbers. Things were great. Unfortunately, in Laval, he had an injury where he had hyperextended his groin or something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a lower body injury.
Okay.
Not good. Montreal season was terrible. Everything was in the garbage. But then that's when the aforementioned 24th team snuck in. Kotkaniemi comes up, and guess who scored the first goal in the first game for us against Pittsburgh?
Eric Stahl. Just kidding.
Jesperi Kotkaniemi.
Nice.
And it was off his face, and it was glorious. And you know what?
Goal scorer's goal.
Him and Suzuki, they pulled that team. They led us. They had 6 goals each in the playoffs.
They absolutely did.
Even the last game where we got eliminated, Suzuki didn't want us to lose. He scored 2 goals in that game, but we let him down, unfortunately. But Kotkaniemi, he's come through, and he's put on the pounds. He's 6'3". He's over 200 pounds. He's a big kid, but he's still only 22. He's still a kid. So he's got a lot of hockey left in him. But my goodness, once he gets that full potential, I'm looking forward to it. He's getting better on faceoffs. He's getting better defensively, and he's putting up points. That's why my team is Kotkaniemi's mole.
And gentlemen, I'm sorry to cut this short, but I'm sure we could be here all night talking hockey if we wanted to. But I think for the sake of time, I'd like to wrap this up just with a quick little anecdote, and then move on to our next topic, which I think will end up being a little bit more concise, shall we say, than it was. But we were just talking a little bit earlier about drafting, right? And how some guys work out, some guys don't. And Tyson, you and I were talking about the 2015 NHL entry draft this week, and this is what I would like to end off on. And it actually is an excellent transition into our next topic, but folks, frankly, drafting is a crapshoot in every sport. It's very hard to ultimately predict whether or not even talented young players will succeed at the professional level. Sometimes, you get Connor McDavids and Sidney Crosbys and Alex Ovechkins that end up being slam dunks, but outside of that, you have a lot of very talented players like Galchenyuks and even sometimes like a Jonathan Drouin, or a Sam Bennett for sure, who for some reason they just fail to reach the level that they were expected to be at, and this is a tough thing to do. So, anyways, with that being said, Boston Bruins had 3 first-round picks in 2015, 2 acquired via trade, number 13, 14, and 15, and they drafted Jakub Zboril, Jake DeBrusk, and Zachary Senyshyn. Now, for some context, Jakub Zboril is only playing in the NHL because that Bruins defense core has been decimated by injuries. Jake DeBrusk, serviceable top 9 forward, but nothing too special. Zachary Senyshyn is buried in the minors. The next 3 players that went off the board, are you guys ready for this?
Yes.
We already know, but Matthew Barzal, Kyle Connor, Thomas Chabot.
Oh.
Man, would you be kicking yourself? Because imagine if you had them lined up.
All 3.
Bang, bang. But this is you don't have future sight. This is the difference here. It's...
Yeah. I remember in the draft, like, the Jakub Zboril pick was a little bit off the board.
Yeah.
That was a little bit of an interesting one.
It was like the Gavrikov draft
in
his last one, where the analysts were scrambling. He's a forward from Russia, because he was literally slated to go like in the 7th round.
Yeah.
So,
And anyways, that's just to put a capper on our very lively hockey panel. And you know what? This was a lot of fun, guys. We definitely need to do a few more of these, but for the interest of time, I got to do my job and move us on. And I think that we're gonna call an audible here, pun intended, and we're going to strip down our next topic, which is related to the NFL draft. Guess what? But with the draft being this Thursday, I figure we will try to spend the bulk of our draft analysis and our draft reactions next week.
Mm-hmm.
But tonight, one thing I did want to talk about, because this is a very highly anticipated and highly debated question in the NFL right now, is will Mac Jones go at number 3 to the San Francisco 49ers, who I believe traded up to acquire this pick, right? They traded up from 12 to acquire this pick, and there's some people, there's a lot of mock drafts these days that are putting him there, but there's also a lot of pundits and fans who are saying this would be a gross reach for a player that is at best a late first round and potentially even a second round talent. But why don't we jump right into this? Mac Jones, youngest of 3, raised in Jacksonville. His family members all played college sports, fun fact. His mom and sister played tennis. His brother played soccer. His dad actually went pro in tennis after a college career in that category. But, of course, he chose football. Unlike our friend Jalen Phillips earlier on, he was only a 3-star recruit. And he joined the Alabama Crimson Tide the same year as, you might have heard of him, Tua Tagovailoa, 5 stars. And Tua Tagovailoa was a highly touted quarterback who obviously started for Alabama until November 2019 when he was brutally injured on a sack. And that's when Mac Jones took over as the starter. At the beginning of last season, the 2020 season, there was questions as to whether Jones would even beat out his backup Bryce Young, I think it was, and he managed to do so. And he truly rolled Tide that year. I have been waiting a long time to use that pun, by the way. Listen, Mac Jones truly rolled Tide last year. He threw 41 touchdowns against just 4 interceptions in the 13 games he played in.
Wow.
He is so far the only Alabama quarterback to reach 4,500 passing yards in one season. And perhaps most impressively for all, he set an all-time record for NCAA completion percentage, 77.4% of his passes as the Crimson Tide juggernaut capped an undefeated season with the 18th national championship in program history, blah, blah, blah. There are a lot of fans that are not happy about that because college football is rife with intense rivalries, every bit as heated as Habs Leafs. Now, let's actually talk about Mac Jones and why there's actually controversy around him going as a top 5 pick, because if I throw you these numbers in a vacuum, you're going to go, wow, this guy's going to be a playmaker in the NFL for sure, right? Well, there's a lot of important context here that we need to explore before we can make that analysis, and let's start by doing that. Mac Jones' strengths, the completion percentage flies off the page at you, and this owes to actually 3 things, I'll say. His accuracy, his ball placement, and his decision-making, and there's nuanced differences here between the 3 of those. Accuracy. He certainly can thread the needle, right? He can make difficult throws, but decision-making. He understands when to throw it into a tight window and when to just look for another receiver. He was able to do this quite successfully in his final college year. He does not have exceptional arm strength, but he is nonetheless a great deep ball thrower. Here are his stats last year on throws of 20-plus yards, which is considered a deep ball. 58.6% completion rate, 34 for 58 on the deep stuff, 17 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. He aired it out, and he gave Devontae Smith and Jalen Waddle, until he was injured, plenty of go routes to have fun on.
Oh yes.
Right. And on tape, we see Mac Jones anticipating where his receivers will be compared to how the defense is playing coverage on that particular play, which leads him to being very successful at all 3 levels of the field. And this is the 3rd thing that I want to talk about, ball placement. Now, to the untrained eye, you might think, accuracy, ball placement are synonyms, right? Not really. Here's the difference. Accuracy is being able to put the ball where you want it, all right? That is, hey, I intend to throw the ball in that spot, and I'm able to throw it there. Ball placement is the ability to understand where you should put the ball before it comes out of your hand, right? One is, that's my target and I can hit the target. The second one is, I understand that I should target my receiver's back shoulder on this play, but not that one. I should throw this receiver open because he's going to break and get out of the zone, so on and so forth. Mac Jones has both of these, at least at the college level, and overall his decision-making has been very solid. To some extent, he also has what we call pocket presence. Now, Cam used to play a bit of offensive line in high school. You understand that when the quarterback is just freelancing back there, it makes your job as an offensive lineman very hard because you can no longer cut angles and the pass rusher can just get around you. Isn't that the case?
This is the truth, and I will say with the quarterback, he's the only one that ever gave us any recognition because he knows night in, night out, we're the one covering his butt.
Very true.
But if you got someone who's active in the pocket and they're doing it becomes difficult because you have to move with him. The pocket has to move around, and that's what your linebackers are for. They're going to notice things are breaking apart and they're going to find a hole.
Absolutely. Now, the thing is with Mac Jones, he is very good at subtle and measured movements in the pocket. He doesn't panic when the pass rush comes close, but he's able to feel where the rushers are coming from, even if he's not directly looking at them. And rather than just void a viable pocket, rather than just take off as his first instinct, he will slide a couple steps to his right, just get that pass rusher out of his face. The offensive lineman can continue to cut a favorable angle for him, and he can just kind of slide back and forth for several seconds if need be. And this is also a great trait, and he's very poised in the pocket as a result. High character guy as well for the most part, because look, he competed with higher end QBs like Tagovailoa and Jalen Hurts throughout his entire career in a situation where a lot of other prospects in college would simply have transferred schools to sort of get an easier shot at the starting position. He did it. He grinded it out, and he earned it the hard way. He also earned 2 degrees in 4 years in Alabama. He took 3 years to get a business communications undergrad, 4.0 GPA on that, by the way, and a master's in sports hospitality in 2020. So we know that he works hard in all areas of his life, and that's a great trait to have for, honestly, any employee. You don't have to be an athlete. Just sometimes, work ethic. Well, I shouldn't say sometimes. It always matters. Scouts definitely love his character, and now I will say that the one blemish on Mac Jones' record is a 2017 arrest due to a DUI and driving with a fake license. But other than that, he's been fairly spotless. Time will tell if that is a one-off mistake by a young man or something more. Weaknesses, on the other hand, like I alluded to before, Mac Jones has, Tyson would say, average at best arm strength. Mm-hmm. Right, he can throw with velocity when he can just set his feet and step into it and hit the end of his drop and just weight transfer. But if you make him throw off balance, his passes tend to flutter, fall short of the mark. There was multiple times last year where Alabama receivers had to come back to the ball on a deep route because he wasn't quite able to put enough heat on it. He's certainly not a Patrick Mahomes or an Aaron Rodgers who can launch it 60 yards with a flick of the wrist or from off-balance positions. 6'3", 217 pounds, fairly average size, I would say. I don't think that's a big talking point either way. The other knock on Jones is he's not one of these newfangled dual threat running quarterbacks. He ran a 4.82 40-yard dash, and that really reflects that. He's average speed by NFL standards, and he lacks the quickness as well to consistently evade defenders or gain chunks of yardage on the ground. Now, having said all of that, the biggest question, I think, is whether or not Jones can overcome NFL adversity after playing on the best team in college football. And that really is the context that I was alluding to earlier. Last year in the Southeastern Conference, the powerhouse SEC, Alabama 541.62 total yards per game. Okay, 48.46 total points per game. That's monstrous. They could not be stopped, frankly. The Florida Gators were the only team that even gave them a close game in the playoffs, and that was still a shootout both ways. Mac Jones had plenty of help from playmakers like Devontae Smith. You got your Heisman Trophy winning wide receiver, 1,856 yards, 23 TDs, projected top 10 pick. He had Najee Harris, a second-team All-SEC running back, 26 total touchdowns, projected first-round pick, and all those guys made Alabama's other offensive players, they made their lives a lot easier. And plus, we need to say, While Jones does have good pocket presence, he rarely needed to truly scramble or deal with heavy pressure because he played on an offensive line with the likes of Evan Neal, Landon Dickerson, and Alex Leatherwood. Dickerson and Leatherwood are both projected late first round picks. So very, very strong offensive line. And of course, you cannot discount Nick Saban, the head coach, and Steve Sarkisian, the former offensive coordinator who was so good and so trusted. He's now the head coach in Texas. Right, Alabama was absolutely stacked from top to bottom. Tyson, you and I have said they might beat the New York Jets in a head-to-head game. Who knows? All right, and people are talking a lot about whether the 49ers will draft Mac at 3rd overall. You would say that this would be quite a reach. Why is that?
Yeah, so here I'm going to give you guys a blind test, okay? I'm going to read you player X draft profile, okay? So this player is very well versed at operating a pro-style offense. So this is their strengths. Mobile enough to sidestep the first wave, but not necessarily very mobile as a player. Very good to short intermediate accuracy, evidenced by good accuracy and completion percentage in college. Delivers the ball well under duress. Very mature leader, very smart and articulate. Highly competitive leader, very well prepared, and was a national championship winner. The weakness was that the player was surrounded by NFL supporting talent, does not have a big-time vertical arm, not very athletic, and that kind of stuff, and sometimes has to have really good receivers make some really good catches. So those are kind of the weaknesses of this player X. Who do you think I just described?
Well, I mean, kind of sounds a bit like Mac, but I'm not sure if that's what you're going with here.
That would be my guess.
We've had a version of this conversation before, and I'm just not fully remembering what it is, so it's kind of, I'm going to say that sounds like Mac Jones.
Yeah, so you would say that it would sound like Mac Jones, right? Yeah, the player that I just described was A.J. McCarron.
Interesting.
Really?
A.J. McCarron, 5th round pick out of the Bengals, was a back-to-back national championship winner for Alabama. Yeah, and this is where I think of Mac Jones kind of being as a prospect. I look at him and I go, he had Steve Sarkisian, which is a very good offensive mind. He had Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, like you said, very good offensive line. Najee Harris might go in the first round to the Steelers. Not a very elite arm, very good and very mature off the field and makes good decisions. But to me, I don't see much difference between Mac Jones and A.J. McCarron. I don't think he's an elite prospect. He didn't wow me with his tape. He made good passes to Devonta Smith, and Devonta Smith had a ton of yak yards this year.
Sure.
A lot like Devonta Smith, he was so good. He would catch a 10-yard pass over the middle of the field and take it 80 yards for a touchdown because he was so skilled, and Steve Sarkisian schemed him open. So, with a wide receiver, you can get schemed open, but getting a 90-yard touchdown pass on a screenplay is different than throwing a 75-yard pass over the middle of the field beating the safety. There's a difference there. Sure. And I think what happened is that you look at Mac Jones' stats and you go, oh my goodness, he's a winner, he's got all these great stats, he's got a great completion percentage, but I don't like his tape. I think he's completely overrated. I think of him like A.J. McCarron. And I think that anything over, a second round pick for Mac Jones would be generous. That's where I think. That's where I have him.
Wow. And you know what? One other thing that I will concede is that if he does go 3rd overall to the 49ers, that's an outdoor stadium, and when the wind starts blowing, his average arm strength might come into play, especially if he's forced to throw from an off-balance position. Again, he's not a Rodgers who doesn't matter, he will put that 60 yards on the target. Right, and another thing that I will say is that when you look at the overall talent pool in the first round across all positions, there's a lot. I mean, Smith, Harris, Kyle Pitts, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Penei Sewell, Patrick Surtain II, Micah Parsons, etc., in addition to the other quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson. So, sure, I think that when it comes to an overall sort of evaluation of the situation, I definitely think you have a point there, and I think that if the 49ers do draft him 3rd overall, it would definitely be way more necessity in the position. Because, 49ers have George Kittle. They're not going to draft Kyle Pitts third overall. They're not going to use that draft capital in that way.
They traded up for a quarterback.
Yes.
Like they traded up a whole bunch of future first-round picks to get this guy that they want here. There's no player that's worth trading multiple first-round picks other than a quarterback. Just because, quarterback in the NFL can change your franchise.
Wait, what about the punter? I'm just kidding.
I'll tell you right now, I could not. I respect the quarterbacks, man. I can't think that fast.
No.
I'll tell you right now. That's why I protected him.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Tyson, I definitely think those are valid points to consider. But my counter argument is that even though Jones is probably not an elite prospect, he is one of the highest floor QBs in the draft. I would say maybe him, like Lawrence for sure, but Lawrence is the consensus number 1 overall pick. When you look at quarterbacks and you look at highest floor next to Lawrence, I'd say it's Mac. And here's why. He doesn't have elite athleticism. He doesn't have high-end talent or rocket arm or any of these high-end things, like you said. But like I said, he has shown accuracy, ball placement, poise, and decision-making, at least at the college level. And in theory, these kinds of traits can help a young quarterback learn to read a defense and take care of the football, even though the competition will get much, much stiffer at the NFL level. And frankly, we have seen far too many athletic, rocket-armed quarterbacks come to the NFL and underwhelm or outright fail, because they can't read a defense and they lack the football IQ necessary to run their offense against NFL schemes. And like we said before, Jones, he's proven to be a hard worker on and off the field. He's shown perseverance by gutting it out against Tagovailoa and Hurts in training camps. And he is a guy who I think may be able to fight through adversity in his professional life once the competition gets stiffer, once the times get tough. He's more likely to stick it out based on his past and do his absolute best to work hard and get better versus having attitude issues or looking for a way out. And we've got to remember, though, the other thing is I think a lot of other people have said something like this, although you didn't now, but a lot of people have said, Mac has played with NFL caliber talent, and so that's why he's so good. But we got to remember, he's not going to a New York Jets. He's not going to a Jacksonville Jaguars that literally need a quarterback to save the franchise. San Francisco is only drafting 3rd overall because they were absolutely decimated by injuries last year, right?
And they traded up.
Well, they did, but when healthy, they've got a good offensive line with Trent Williams, Mike McGlinchey, and Alex Mack. And in 2019, before all those injuries, they had the number 4 offense in the NFL, including the number 2 rushing attack, both in terms of total yardage, 6,097 yards total, number 4, and the number 2 defense too. They allowed just 4,509 yards, right? So he, in theory, like if Bosa and those guys get healthy, he should have a defense that'll help him out. He'll have George Kittle, a great target to throw to. Deebo Samuel may not be Devontae Smith, but he's certainly not bad. And there's a powerhouse Kyle Shanahan run game here that could take some heat off him. And so to conclude my analysis of this situation, The Athletic projects Jones as a late 1st round, early 2nd round pick. And I would agree with that in a vacuum. I think that in an ideal situation, you would not take him top 10 given all these, I guess, more proven talents in the 1st round. But the thing is, I believe that Jones's specific traits give him a greater chance to succeed as an NFL quarterback compared to many others in this draft. Like, he may not ever be a superstar, but he is what I would call a high floor, low ceiling prospect and a relatively safe pick. And because the 49ers need a quarterback and they traded up because they don't want to take any chances, I wouldn't hate the pick if they drafted him at 3. He may not have the ceiling of a Trevor Lawrence for sure, or Justin Fields, but for me, it's just my view is influenced by just how many glitzy athletic quarterbacks have failed in the NFL because ultimately people were overvaluing them for the wrong reasons. And if Mac Jones is being overvalued right now, I would argue he is at least being overvalued for the right reasons. And given how, like we've said a few minutes ago, a draft is a crapshoot in any sport, it's a dice that I personally would be willing to roll if I am a 49ers fan. And I certainly admit that there's a valid opposing argument to that, but that's where I stand.
I disagree. I just do. I think that, like you say, that he has the highest floor. What is that floor? Like, backup quarterback for the 7 years? Like, if that's his floor, like, sure, like, that may be his highest floor. Like, maybe these other guys don't have a high floor because, they have that boom-bust potential, especially a guy like Justin Fields or Zach Wilson. But, why would you draft third overall for the lowest ceiling quarterback? It doesn't make sense to me. Like, why would you trade up for Mac Jones when you could have gotten him at 12? Because nobody loved Mac Jones before the draft. Before the 49ers started trading up, that's when all this information came out that, the 49ers really like Mac Jones. It doesn't make sense to me. I understand that you'd be willing to roll the dice on a Mac Jones. I would be much more comfortable rolling the dice on a Justin Fields, or even what's that other guy out of
Zach Wilson potentially?
No, out of North Dakota State.
Trey
Lance. I forgot his first name. Trey Lance. I'd roll the dice on him 10 times out of 10 before I'd roll the dice on Mac Jones. Just because, if you say the situation in San Francisco is as good as you say it is, then the situation in San Francisco would be equally beneficial to Trey Lance as it would be to Mac Jones. So I think, why not take the guy with the most talent, who is also the maturest, who is also one of the more mature quarterbacks.
Despite his youth.
Yeah, he's very young, but still very mature. And yeah, he needs a little bit more work. FCS, he didn't play FBS, but he was still a very good quarterback. And, I would take him with the better talent and the maturity and not a DUI on his record over a guy like Mac Jones.
Well, at least it's not Christian Ponder, or at least we hope it's not Christian Ponder we're talking about here. But no, I think that's a valid point, and I think ultimately what I'd like to end off with is we seem to be talking about two conflicting philosophies when it comes to investing in a team. You were talking about the boom bust, and I was talking about sort of the high floor situation, and I think that, well, first of all, I'll say this. Fans are a fickle bunch. Analysts are a fickle bunch that are also wrong all the time. Draft is a crapshoot, and so there's ultimately going to be a ton of chance and circumstance involved in this situation. But, yeah, I see where you're coming from. I think what you're saying is that if you are going to have high draft picks, solid draft capital available, essentially you would try to hit a home run and rather strike out doing it, in a sense, whereas I would put the ball in play, to use a bit of a baseball analogy there. And I think that, I think where I'm coming from is kind of like I said, quarterback in particular, extremely volatile position. I guess where my mind goes is that first off the bat is that, again, with San Francisco having all these assets like the run game, the O-line, the defense, to me, I think it might be costly to straight up whiff on a highly touted quarterback, because even if Mac Jones becomes not little more than a top 20 game manager type of a quarterback, if you have that run game, if you have that defense, you're still a very competitive team into the playoffs. But if you whiff on someone like a Trey Lance, and I don't ever want to think he's going to bust, but if someone like Trey Lance busts, well, congratulations, you're putting yourself behind the eight ball in a big way. But having said that, I would fully validate sort of the conflicting philosophy of, well, if the 49ers are in such a good position, they have a better chance to develop Lance, and the payoff is higher. But with that being said, guys, it's time to wrap up an exciting and probably our longest running episode of the season so far. But folks, thank you so much for hanging out with us. And certainly next week and the weeks to come, we will have plenty of NFL draft reaction stuff. And it will be exciting to see where guys like Mac Jones and Trey Lance and a lot of other talented people, where they end up going and how people feel about that. But until then, Cam, thank you so much for being with us today. Tyson, pleasure as always. My name is David Song, saying good day or good night from the draft board.